AJUDADA.
I think if it's a really good conversation, then we can just keep having our conversation.
Just to explain what we are going to do here. So this is the only moment where people that are recognized professionally on this area, on these themes, they sit together in different space as the other participants. But we wanted to be a little bit different. That would be, we asked them not to prepare, not to do a presentation, but to have a conversation. And they will use the language that they prefer, and we as facilitators, we will be almost not intervening. We will just interpret and let them be. Okay?
Ok, isto vai ser o único momento hoje que reunimos os especialistas nesta área para uma conversa sobre o tema. E pedimos aos nossos 5 pessoas aqui a não preparar nada, a não apresentar nada, mas sim fazer uma conversa livre, em que pode surgir o que pode surgir quando 5 pessoas com muita experiência se juntam.
Good afternoon. Is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Tim Crabtree, and I work as a lecturer at Schumacher College, which is a small graduate college set up about 21 years ago, and has worked with a lot of teachers who I think provide inspiration for the transition movement, for example, like Fritjof Capra and Brian Goodwin and James Lovelock. And I work there part-time, and I also work part-time for social enterprise in southwest England, and we're involved in local food initiatives, community renewable energy initiatives, and affordable housing initiatives. So we deal with the kind of 3 core kind of needs within the local economy.
Bem, eu vou tentar de falar em português porque estamos no Portugal, é seguro que vou fazer bastante erros, espero que me perdoem.
Não há problema. Não há problema.
Bem, o meu nome é Anselm Jappe, donc eu sou teórico, provavelmente estou pouco diferente dos outros participantes aqui, donc desde muitos anos participo em vários tentativas de compreender a natura do capitalismo contemporâneo. Publiquei nos anos 90 livro sobre os situacionistas e Guy Debord, que também está publicado no Portugal. Depois participei na elaboração de uma teoria, dizemos, post-marxista, a crítica do valor, donc inicialmente lançado para as revistas alemãs Crisis e Exit. E também publiquei livro, As Aventuras da Mercadoria, sobre essa interpretação do crise do capitalismo contemporâneo. Ultimamente também publiquei vários escritos sobre o fim do dinheiro e sobre a saída necessária da sociedade do dinheiro, também a saída necessária da saída do trabalho, da mercadoria do Estado. E donc, os meus esforços teóricos sempre se voltam para compreender os fundamentos da sociedade na qual estamos obrigados a viver e como chegar numa mudança que seja uma mudança verdadeira e não somente uma mudança de façada.
Uhum. Boa tarde, o meu nome é Ana Margarida Esteves, como já devem ter percebido, eu sou portuguesa e embora tenha vivido os últimos 16 anos no estrangeiro, em vários países, estou de volta a Portugal e irei hoje falar em português. Eu sou, como é que eu me posso definir? Eu sou investigadora, sou ativista, Sou também escritora. Até agora eu tenho feito pesquisa, sobretudo pesquisa-ação em colaboração com movimentos sociais na Europa e também na América do Norte e na América do Sul, sobre economia solidária e também a chamada economia da reciprocidade e economia da dádiva. Tenho alguns artigos publicados sobre a economia solidária na sua perspectiva institucional, como projeto de transformação socioeconómica e política, e também como projeto educativo, como projeto de formação de subjetividades, de identidades ao nível individual e de entidades ao nível coletivo. Tenho publicado artigos nessa área, sobre a parte institucional, socioeconómica e política, e também sobre a economia solidária, dita solidária, também podemos entendê-la como economia da reciprocidade ou da troca, é tudo uma questão de palavras, como forma de educação popular não formal. Eu também estou em Portugal, não só para me voltar a reenraizar aqui, mas também para continuar a desenvolver a minha atividade como investigadora e ativista e também para desenvolver um projeto que é a Academia Cidadã, que vai ser uma organização, no fundo, não sei se podemos chamar uma escola, porque o termo escola já foi tão corrompido e está tão conotado com formas de ser, formas de educar, formas de estar autoritárias, mas vai ser um centro, uma espécie de, o que podemos chamar de círculo cultural, na qual as pessoas podem tomar consciência daquilo que elas sabem, daquilo que elas já sabem, da sabedoria que cada uma e que cada um de nós já tem. Um centro no qual as pessoas podem trocar ideias, partilhar conhecimentos e desenvolver estratégias de transformação social através disso.
E agora como é que eu vou reproduzir isso?
Queres que eu fale em inglês?
Descurto, vá.
Ok. I'm going to speak in English right now. My name is Ana Margarida Esteves. I'm Portuguese. I've been living abroad for the past 16 years. I returned to Portugal for good about a month ago. I'm a sociologist, a researcher, an activist, an educator, and a writer. My research so far has been focusing on what is known within academic and also some activist circles as solidarity economy, which in practice is the same as the gift economy or reciprocity-based economy. It's all a question of words, and it's all a question of the cultural traditions from which these words, these terms come from. I have articles published on the solidarity economy from the institutional perspective, meaning solidarity economy as a project of socio-economic and political transformation, and also about solidarity economy as a pedagogical project, as a project of learning by doing, as a project of transformation of subjectivities and of collective identities, as a project of learning in a reciprocal and horizontal way. And I'm back in Portugal not only to reroute myself and also to continue my research, but also to work in the setting up of a project called the Citizenship Academy, which is a school of non-formal learning and participatory action research on activism and engaged citizenship. And the purpose is to create what Paulo Freire and Miles Horton called a culture circle, a circle in which people can actually become aware of what they already know, of their own innate wisdom, of the wisdom they gain through their everyday life, and a center in which people can not only become aware of that, but also exchange their knowledge, learn from each other in a circle, and build strategies for personal and social transformation based on the learning and on the engaged research we will together carry out in the Citizenship Academy.
Thank you. Gary. Very short.
Very short. I'm Gary Alexander. I'm a New Yorker who's lived in England for 40 years. Currently...
Like Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick. I'm currently on the board of trustees of the Transition Network, and I've had lots of other practical projects in the community where I live and the region where I live. I worked for the Open University in the UK for 37 years, where I had interests in online collaborative learning and particularly interests in sustainable communities. I've written a book called Gaia, growing a peaceful, sustainable Earth through communications, which looks and creates a vision of how could we all live collaboratively? How could we create a new social contract where the economy is collaborative at all scales, where governance is collaborative from the grassroots on up? And I see this as a great opportunity for that to move forward as AJUDADA. Thrilled to be here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Charles Eisenstein, and as you can see, I'm extremely professional. Which should be obvious, not only because of my face paint, but also because I'm up here and you're down there. So I'm happy that this gathering is playing a little bit with the normal conference structures, so that we don't fall into the habit of blindly accepting knowledge from above in some way. Yeah, I write books, and I'm a speaker. My most recent book was called Sacred Economics. I like to play, and maybe I should impress you with some big words. Performativity. Autopoiesis. There, I'm done.
So the question for today is, how do we promote change? How can the gift culture contribute in building and strengthening a resilient community? And this is going to be a conversation between you five. Okay?
I'll start, sure. So I'll talk to everybody at once here. Maybe we can, well, really a lot of what my work is about is the transition in our civilization's defining narratives. And part of the old narrative that we're moving away from is that the way to change the world is through some kind of force, and that our ability to create change depends on how much force we have at our disposal. One kind of force is monetary force, which you can use money to make people do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. But we're finding that the people who want positive change today have a lot less money than the entrenched interests. So in the new narrative, we understand that the world, that society, maybe even the universe, has a spontaneous, inherent tendency toward organization, toward health, toward change, that the universe is intelligent in some way. And that force is not the primary operating principle. On a more practical level, the expression of that is a gift economy where people aren't forced to do things or induced to do things, but that we trust everybody's innate desire to contribute to something larger than themselves. For example, AJUDADA.
Okay, what I was saying is that Charles is right when he says that there's an innate tendency within every being in the cosmos and within the cosmos itself to create order out of chaos, to create organizations. But there's a peculiarity in human organizations, is that very often these organizations tend to become pathological structures which create obstacles to flow. Remember one of the basic laws of the cosmos, panta rei, everything flows. Water flows, air flows, social groups flow, human relationships flow. Food flows, blood flows through our body. However, in human organizations, very often, the cultures that we create, the organizations that we create, prevent that flow. And as a result, they create hierarchies that end up self-reproducing. They create interest groups that self-reproduce and very often end up not representing any other interest than that of the interest groups themselves. Very often you have so-called elites that self-reproduce, and to the point that they're not elites anymore, but just interest groups that become cancers of society.
Well, building on what my two good friends here are saying, yes, there are a lot of very fixed ideas out there, and it's interesting to be in a place where maybe some of these fixed ideas are breaking down. That's really why I'm so interested in being here in AJUDADA, in Porto Alegre. But as to what comes next, the order which will emerge isn't going to come from the sky. It's going to come from all of us, all of you, all of us figuring it out, inventing it. And that's what I think is going to happen in the next 2 days to a slight extent. We will see what kind of order can come out of the community.
Eu acho quando todos estão de acordo é uma situação bem chata. Eu vou tentar de dizer pouco coisas diferentes. Para mim, eu não vejo absolutamente uma tendência à harmonia cósmica. Ou ao menos na sociedade humana me parece mais uma sucessão de catástrofes.
Exato. Exactly.
O capitalismo foi uma catástrofe quando funcionou, quando marchou, com toda uma série de misérias, de exploração e de extermínio de povos inteiros, mas o capitalismo é também uma catástrofe quando não marcha mais, como não marcha mais depois umas décadas. Hoje, a mudança, o conceito de mudança também bem mudou, porque finalmente nós estamos obrigados de relacionarmos com o feito que o capitalismo está mais ou menos acabando, mas não está acabando de maneira pacífica. Nesta altura, por exemplo, o fim do dinheiro não é mais programa utópico, é já uma realidade, mas uma realidade que também tem aspecto muito ruim. Primeiramente, para 2 séculos, o capitalismo nos obrigou nos habituou de fazer toda a vida somente para o dinheiro e de esquecer todas as tradições de dávida, de ajudada e de todo substituir com o dinheiro. E agora que nós vivemos na sociedade completamente marcada por o dinheiro, não tem mais dinheiro. Essa é uma situação bem dramática. Agora estamos obrigados a imaginar uma saída da sociedade baseada no dinheiro, na mercadoria e no trabalho, mas nada não está absolutamente seguro que a saída será uma saída positiva. A outra possibilidade é também a saída bárbara, e até agora é a possibilidade de saída que está prevalendo no mundo inteiro. Me parece, nessa situação, o importante é também de recuperar toda uma série de tradições, como toda a tradição que existe do dom ou da dávida, porque a humanidade não sempre foi capitalista, a humanidade não sempre foi organizada exclusivamente para vender e para comprar. Isso não significa que as sociedades pré-capitalistas eram harmoniosas. Não existe uma sociedade harmoniosa, felizmente. O que me parece interessante numa iniciativa como a AJUDADA é também de recuperar as tradições que podem existir também no campo, nas pequenas cidades, nas sociedades mais ou menos tradicionais, que provavelmente ainda não foram completamente transformadas para a mentalidade da mercadoria. Atualmente tem também na sociologia, na antropologia, tem muitos estudos sobre a dávida, também na tradução de Marcel Mauss, que demonstram que não poderia existir uma sociedade humana sem a ajuda recíproca, sem a dávida, e que normalmente mas ao mesmo tempo o capitalismo é pouco como um tipo de cancro que transformou todos os relacionamentos humanos em relacionamentos simplesmente de mercadoria, de trabalho e de dinheiro.
One of the people that we study about at Schumacher College is somebody called Karl Polanyi, and Karl Polanyi wrote a very interesting book called The Great Transformation. He was an anthropologist, and he talked about the way that societies have changed, and in the past, the economy was embedded in society and in nature, but now the economy has become disembedded from society and from nature. So we need this transition back, learning from the past, but being also present to the future and the now. We need this new transition or transformation. So I think Karl Polanyi said something very interesting. In the transition movement, I think it's very interesting that they talk about this outer transition or outer transformation that is required, but they also talk about an inner transition that is required. And I think what Charles was saying was that if we just are thinking about the change that is needed, we will force things. We will see enemies, or we will try to clash with things. So it's from finding, a kind of gentle space within, where the energy that we take to this outer transition is a kind of peaceful energy. It's a determined energy, but it's not it's not clashing with people. So I think this outer transition and inner transition, I think this is something very interesting that is emerging from the transition movement.
I'd like to build on both what Anselm and Tim have said. And first of all, maybe an interesting point is capitalism as the problem. I think it's actually going very, very much deeper than that. Capitalism, as we do it now, it's changed in my lifetime, is the extreme end of a disconnection of our exchange from community and from the natural world. And that's why we're a cancer now. A friend of mine once said, money is institutionalized mistrust.
Yeah.
And that's, so when you exchange with money, there's no ongoing relationship. Whereas the gift economy requires an ongoing relationship. I give something to you, you may not give me something back tomorrow, but one day you'll give it to someone else, will give it back to me. It's ongoing giving and receiving. And especially now for the future in an organized way, that is the opposite of, capitalism, but a lot of monetary trade.
Circumstances in which that institutionalized mistrust, which is deeply ingrained in our society, is actually deconstructed in a kind of perverse way, I must say. Actually, that book shows one thing that we already know, which is that modern societies, despite all the good things that are inherent to modernity, all the comforts, all the advances in medicine, all the advances in technology, it has placed us in a kind of grids that creates inner as well as outer divisions. And it becomes very difficult to really learn from each other and to really understand who we are as individuals, as a species, and as societies. Actually, what Rebecca Solnit points out is that in moments of disaster, be it natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in 2005, or the earthquake that hit San Francisco in 1989, something happens that seems to immediately destroy that kind of grids that alienates us from ourselves and from each other, and that actually creates huge barriers to reciprocal learning and to the understanding of what we are as individuals, as a species, and as societies. And in these moments, despite the catastrophe, despite all the destruction and all the pain, and perhaps because of that, people seem to intuitively recover the age-old art of storytelling. And I'm not talking about fairy tales. I'm talking actually about the ability of telling stories about ourselves, to talk about ourselves, to talk about our lives, our joys, our pains, our needs, what we need from each other, and to build a common project. And this art of storytelling, this art of talking about ourselves, has been hugely perverted in our societies. It has been associated with with some of the so-called diseases of postmodernity, with neurosis, with narcissism, with self-obsession, with psychotherapy, with group therapy. And what happens in those disasters in which all these beliefs are shattered, in which there is a kind of void from which something deeper and more natural emerges, is that we really need to lose the shame of talking about ourselves, our lives, our needs, our dreams in an honest way. It's actually the necessary path for really to start building something together again. And that's the core of the gift economy. It's not only about material gift giving, it's about the gift of ourselves, the gift of our own life stories, of our experience, of our thoughts, our projects and dreams. I hope I'm not sounding too new agey, but I'm just trying to keep the academic with me, you know, quiet and shut.
Yeah, first maybe I'll start with the crisis of capital, which is becoming very obvious here in Portugal.
Oh, yeah.
In America, we can still pretend that our economic system is working. At least some of us can still pretend it, but it's hard to pretend here. So the crisis of capitalism is never very far away. Mm-hmm. Because of technological advances in productivity, because of the falling rate of profit, competition, and the concentration of wealth that is always happening. The only way that capitalism can survive is through economic growth. And what is economic growth? Economic growth, fundamentally, it's the conversion of nature into products and the conversion of human relationships into paid services. So when you reach the limits of that in a country, in the past, that's okay. You can find some other place on Earth where people still have a gift economy and where there are still natural resources. Or technology can enable you to access natural resources, and I have a problem with that term, but access natural resources that were once unavailable, or to replace human relationships that were once impossible to commoditize. For example, before sound recording, it was very hard to replace the relationship of getting together and singing, the social function of entertainment and music with a product. Yeah, so today, the crisis of capital is impossible to solve because we're running out of nature to convert into product and running out of human relationships that are not yet monetized. In America, we pay for almost everything, and there's almost no relationships left. Even the most intimate things, preparing food. Nearly 2/3 of all meals in America are prepared outside the home. Even play. When I was a child, we would go outside and have adventures. Today, they pay for adventures online. So yeah, the crisis of capital now is coming to a point. Oh, another way that we used to solve it was by having a war. Destroy so that we could grow again. And we still do that, but we can't have total war between the great powers anymore because of nuclear weapons. And of course, the ecological limits to growth are preventing the further conversion of air, water, earth into money. The question then is, what can we do besides waiting for it all to collapse when there's absolutely nothing left? We can begin to reclaim some of what's lost, some of what's been converted. I'm not saying this is the only thing that we need to do. Work on every level is necessary, including the political level and the systemic level, and the personal level, and the internal level, and the relational level, because the mindset of capitalism invades us on every level. But when we recreate, when we reclaim gift community and preserve it and extend it, we're actually hastening the collapse, because we're saying, here's a relationship that will not be monetized. When you teach somebody how to cook again, that's bad for the economy. When you create gift relationships in Porto Alegre. That's bad for the economy. That shrinks the market. That shrinks demand for, if you're meeting your needs with gift, then you're not buying things anymore. When you're sharing, then you're not buying things anymore, and that hastens the crisis of capitalism, but it also means that there's some wealth left. Same if you protect a forest, or if you, save a river or stop a road. There's some wealth left. And I see that is what our task is right now, to hasten the collapse and mitigate its severity so that we have something on which to build a new society.
The question that we started the conversation with was, do we have any suggestions for how this concept of gift could be translated in Porto Alegre into kind of practical things? And so I wanted to follow up what Charles was saying about this issue of commodification by the market. And I think if you take those three areas that I mentioned right at the start, food, housing, and energy, these I think are really important areas that we need to live: food, warmth, shelter. Some of the practical work that some of, say, the transition groups in England are doing in this area. So if we take food, one of the big problems with food is that many people want to grow food. They want to make their living by growing food, but the market has turned land into a commodity, and land becomes very expensive. So we're seeing in England, you're seeing in places like France, an organization called teve, organizations that are finding ways to acquire land and then to put this land into trust, so out of the market, and then make that land available to people who want to grow it. In the area of housing, we're using the same kind of mechanism, a community land trust, for housing. So we take the land out of the market, and then we have maybe a group of people who will work together to build their houses. So again, the cost of that housing can be much lower. So this is a very old mechanism in America, but it's being reinvented in Europe, these community land trusts for housing. And in the area of energy, at the moment we use stored solar energy in the form of oil and coal and gas, but we have this free gift from the sun. And so a lot of groups, including transition groups, have initiatives, for solar-based power, renewable energy, so that you can take that gift rather than having to buy energy as a commodity on the market. And then the final example is that all of those initiatives in food, housing, energy, they actually do need money. So, for example, if you're a grower, it's going to take you maybe 3 months or 6 months between planting the seeds and being able to sell that to your neighbors. So where are you going to get the money? If you want to build a house, you need the money to buy the bricks to build the house. You haven't got that yourself. Or if you want to buy a solar panel, you have to get that from somewhere else. But we are now seeing the emergence of many financial mechanisms which are not traditional mechanisms that treat money as a commodity where you're trying to maximize your return. So we're starting to see peer-to-peer lending or zero interest banks like the Jack Bank. And these initiatives, I think we need these initiatives. We shouldn't say that everything is done without money, but we should be saying how can we develop new financial mechanisms that meet our aspirations for a gift economy.
And it's also in this perspective that we work in the Citizenship Academy. We want to create grassroots focal points for the reciprocal sharing of knowledge, to break the habit that we have that knowledge is something that comes from above and that structures society. The purpose is to create new structures for sharing knowledge that are horizontal and come from the grassroots and become catalyzers for social change and actually support the kind of cooperative structures that Tim is talking about. And at the Citizenship Academy, we are very keen on creating this grassroots focal point for the horizontal and reciprocal sharing of knowledge, because we are aware that in times of paradigmatic crisis, there are two possible paths. One of them is a transition towards a new paradigm, one based on more social justice, one based on sharing, one based on stewardship of the earth. But there's also the possibility of relapsing in old habits. And unfortunately, it's far easier to relapse into old habits than to transition into something new, exactly because they are habits, because they are based on information that has been put into our unconscious minds and also in our conscious minds by hierarchical structures, by authoritarian structures of creation and transmission of knowledge. So therefore, we want to create horizontal nucleus of knowledge creation and sharing based on reciprocity in order to really break with those old habits, in order to break with those mental structures that promote relapse, and in order to facilitate the transition to the cooperative structures that Tim Crabtree is talking about.
We've been talking about the way the old structures of exchange are breaking down, are reaching their limits. We've been talking about some of the new ideas which come in from Schumacher College, from all over. We heard some of those here this morning. My interest isn't really so much in what we can tell you, it's finding out what's happening here. Mm-hmm. Could I maybe finish by asking you some questions? We did this limited mapping exercise this morning. There's much more people here. If there's 200 or 300 people here, that's a significant fraction of the population of Porto Alegre. How many people here are from Porto Alegre?
Quantas pessoas é que há aqui de Porto Alegre? Portanto, o Gary está a tentar retomar o exercício de mapeamento que começámos esta manhã, mas como agora há muito mais gente, torna-se bastante mais significativo.
How many are from Portugal?
Quantas pessoas de Portugal, sem ser Porto Alegre,
That's a lot. Okay. Do you think it's possible that the ideas in Portugal are really changing? Are people open to really new ideas like the gift economy?
A pergunta é, estas pessoas de Porto Alegre e de Portugal acreditam que é possível realmente mudar este sistema e com as ideias que as pessoas trazem?
Let me see. How many? How many say no?
Don't be shy, don't be shy. Não tenham vergonha, digam que não, se realmente...
See, it's my hope. The reason I'm here is to see whether we can get enough people. It doesn't have to be everybody in Porto Alegre, in Portugal, just a nucleus in Porto Alegre, a few hundred maybe, to really create something radically different. Do you think that's possible? Who thinks that's possible?
O desafio do Gary é que realmente, se as pessoas acreditam que é possível mesmo, com as pessoas que estão aqui, com as pessoas de Porto Alegre, não é preciso terem todas as pessoas de Porto Alegre, nem todas as pessoas que estão aqui, se acreditam que é possível fazer com um núcleo de pessoas motivadas qualquer coisa de diferente. E, bom...
E havia ainda uma resposta em inglês. Sim, mas precisamos de ajuda. Para mim, isto é um fim muito positivo desta mesa redonda e ainda temos 2 dias para continuar a nossa conversa. Então, queria mesmo agradecer a vocês para essa conversa, esta partilha com nós todos.
So, Annelieke is saying that she finds that we're reached the point where somehow we feel that there is some sort of a conclusion, and we will still have 2 days ahead of us where we can still discuss these issues. And she thanks everybody here, the 5 of you who were kind enough to share with us your ideas, your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.